Welcome to another episode of Tibalt's Apprentice, Luck of the Draw. Filmed on location at the Game Hub in Manhattan Beach, California, 1809 Manhattan Beach Boulevard. The only thing better than having a game store to go to is having a comic book store right next door. Welcome to another episode of Tibalt's Apprentice, Luck of the Draw. We have a new face here joining us. This is Clem. Clem is somebody that I've met here at the local game store, that is Game Hub in Manhattan Beach, California. And Clem, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We've had the pleasure of playing a few games, and I've had the, I guess I'll call it pleasure of playing you with the deck that we're going to be talking about today. It's ironic that I lost to this deck because of missed triggers immediately after I had recorded an episode warning myself, reminding myself, talking about how important it was to keep track of triggers or whatever. This deck, however, is crazy, ridiculous, and fun. Fun to play, I imagine. Fun to play against? Sure. Anyhow, who are you talking here about?
We are talking about Krenko-Mob-Boss. He is my favorite commander. He was the first commander I started off with, and goblins will always have a special place in my heart.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, what's more to say? You make goblins.
You make goblins, that's it. And you use them in interesting ways. Really quick, just how long have you been playing?
I've been playing probably 10 years, I'd say.
Okay.
On and off, but yeah, 10 years.
But during that time, goblins are what held a special place in your heart, huh?
Yeah, I always go back to goblins. My first deck was, for standard actually was red-black goblins and vampires.
Rakdos. I love those colors.
Yeah.
So anyhow, let's get right into this deck then. So you broke it down in kind of a unique way here. So tell me about the categories that you have, or the cards that you have here.
Yeah. So I have the necessary cards to make the deck work.
Okay.
Then I have good things to buy after you have the necessary components. And then I just have the funniest cards to combo off with.
Nice. Okay. Starting with the mob boss here, what's his ability? His ability is?
So you tap him and you put X 1/1 goblins out on the field equal to the number of goblins currently on the field.
Nice. That, I'm sure, gets out of hand with just a little bit of help. But what do you have to help get this ball rolling?
Well, so the first thing I have is Anger, Fervor, and Goblin War Chief. These cards are absolutely necessary for getting Krenko, for helping Krenko to get not only on the field, but fast, and like being able to tap them as soon as possible. So Anger helps against mill decks, because if they mill Anger out, it doesn't really matter. Because because it's a red deck, obviously you have mountains.
Right.
And all your creatures get haste.
We've talked about incarnations on this channel before. They're a personal favorite of mine. I think they add so much value, and I think are undervalued by the majority of people in EDH, or from what I've seen in the play groups that I've played with. But
yeah. And then next I have Fervor. Fervor is a 3-mana enchantment that just gives your creatures haste. There's no fancy flair to it. It just does one thing. But there's not a lot of enchantment removal, or not at least here. So yeah. And then third is Goblin War Chief. Goblin War Chief is probably the most necessary card in this deck, besides Krenko himself.
Right.
Goblins. He's a 3-mana creature. His first ability is Goblin spells you cast cost one colorless less.
Right.
And then he also has goblins you control have haste.
Nice.
And that is probably the best card, just because you can play Krenko for 3 mana instead of 4.
Right.
And it's makes everything super easy.
So two things. I mean, one, since goblins are usually cheap casting costs because they have low power and toughness for the most part, definitely a value. Would you say this deck is a competitive deck or more of a fun deck, or what would you describe it as?
I play it as a fun deck. However, I've been told by other people, some of them have been on your show, that it is S tier and probably the most competitive goblin deck you will ever find.
Okay, fair enough. Well, what else makes it work?
There is Goblin Motivator, Goblin Chieftain, and Goblin War Driver. Now, Goblin Motivator is a good first play because he costs 1 mana and he has a tap ability that says target creature gains haste until the end of turn, which is great because you're not going to play Krenko turn 1
Sure.
as much as you want to. So you play Goblin Motivator instead.
Sure.
And you just wait to give Krenko haste.
So we talked about this in the most recent episode here with Max too, that absolute key to a good competitive deck, well, not even a competitive deck, a good commander deck is having redundancy in the deck. And I can see obviously haste is very important to have.
Yeah.
And so you definitely have it in here and a few other ones. What do the other two do?
Goblin Chieftain gives all goblins haste and +1/+1.
Yeah.
Making all your goblins 2/2s is amazing because you're making so many goblins that you double the damage that you can do.
Right.
Yeah. And then the third one is Goblin War Driver, which has Battle Cry, which is basically he attacks and he gives all creatures attacking +1/+0.
Nice.
Yeah. So then another two necessary parts to the deck are Goblin Matron and Skirt Prospector.
I've never seen a Goblin Matron. What is that?
Goblin Matron is basically a tutor for goblins.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah. It's 3 mana, it's a 3 mana 1/1, and you can search your deck for any goblin spell.
Nice.
Or on any goblin creature spell. But yeah, it's
Reveal it, put it into your hand. Nice.
yeah. It's
M7. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they actually remade it recently, but it's it's as important as War Chief, Goblin War Chief, because you get exactly the goblin you want.
Exactly what you're looking for.
Normally, if I don't have Goblin War Chief in my hand and I play Goblin Matron, you can guess I'm looking for Goblin War Chief.
Sure.
Skirt Prospector is great. It's another great first drop. It costs 1 red mana. You sacrifice a goblin and gain one red mana. You
Right.
float 1 red mana. Yeah. It's good because, especially if you're in a mana fix or you're in a mana bind, you need
Just that one more to cast it.
Yeah.
You've got the ability.
nice.
Nice.
And you're making so many tokens that it just ends up not mattering if you kill one.
Right.
Yeah. The next ones are Siege Gang Commander and Goblin Bombardment.
I love the Siege Gang Commander.
Siege Gang Commander is a great card.
Big fan of that when it was in Standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do Siege Gang Commander and Goblin Bombardment do basically the same thing, except which is sacrifice a goblin, deal 1 damage to target player.
Right.
Except Siege Gang Commander costs 2 mana as well as sacrificing a goblin. So it's a little worse than Goblin Bombardment, but having 2 things that do the same thing is still.
It's that redundancy we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm actually just reading, it does 2 damage instead of just 1.
Right.
Another card that is very important is Impact Tremors. Now, Impact Tremors is an enchantment, and when a creature enters the battlefield, you do 1 damage to target creature to each opponent.
To each opponent. Okay.
Yeah. And you're making tokens. Kind of an
Always going to be something entering, always going to be multiples. I would say, not always, but generally, most of the stuff you have brings in multiple tokens.
Yeah.
Right.
The next 2 cards are Jeering Instigator and Active Treason.
Now, you said before this that Active Treason was a necessary card. Interested because I almost always play that just as an ancillary card. It's something else that I find in there. Why do you think that's necessary for this one?
To do funny things.
Okay.
Because it's not always the best strategic play, but I always try my best to have my Jeering Instigator out on the field while my Act of Treason is in hand. Because they... so Jeering Instigator is a morph card. It comes in as a 3/3, but when it unmorphs, you gain control of another creature until the end of the turn, and you untap that creature and give it haste.
Sure.
So with these cards, if you tap Krenko once, and then you want to untap them again, these cards are quite necessary because there's not a lot of untapping in red.
In red, sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the best you can get as far as that. The next cards are the 3 sorceries that all kind of do the same thing. Dragon Fodder, Krenko's Command, they make 2, you play them, they're 2 mana, make 2 1/1 goblins.
Right.
Hordling Outburst is 3 mana, make 3 1/1 goblins. These are great early game because you just get more goblin tokens.
Some of these these are the same cards that I play in my Worth the Raid Mother deck because I too like making goblin tokens.
Yeah. Cool Dog, I can't pronounce that, but Rebirth is another good card. It says, as an additional cost to cast Rebirth, sacrifice an artifact. And then you get to it's 1 mana, and you get to put 3 goblin tokens out on the field.
Okay.
Now, this works well with another card we'll see later called Treasure Nabber, because you can steal your opponent's artifacts and then destroy them to make 3 1/1 goblins.
Right.
Goblin Bushwhacker is another good card because it's 1 mana. It has a kicker that costs 1 red mana. And it says when Goblin Bushwhacker enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until the end of turn. So it's another haste card, and that +1/+0 is also amazing. Yeah. Battle Hymn and Brightstone Ritual are 2 other cards that help you when you're in a mana bind. Battle Hymn says you get you float 1 red mana for each creature in play. Brightstone Ritual is very similar. It costs 1 colorless mana less, and you get 1 red mana for each goblin in play.
Okay.
They are hilarious. I've had it where I had 70 goblin tokens out on the field. I had Skull Clamp out, and I played Battle Hymn and I was just searching my deck to get as much as I could, and then I ended up finding Brightstone Ritual in my deck, and I was like, well, may as well just play it for fun. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And then Goblin War Drums is another card. I've recently added it. I'd put it in the same category as Fervor. It gives your creatures menace, which is great for goblins because it means they're harder to block.
Right. I was going to say another one of those cards or keywords I think that doesn't get the respect that it deserves, or isn't looked at as a valid option for things. And I think that people forget how devastating menace can be when you need to get through, and certainly when you're attacking with a crowd of tokens, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Now moving on to cards that I think are absolutely they're cards that you should buy to add to make your deck better. Ruby Medallion, red spells you cast 1 less. Krenko Tin Street Kingpin is great. Because first of all, he's the same Krenko, which is always good.
Definitely on flavor.
And he's a beautiful goblin. Look at him. But he's good early game because you get more goblins out. and you already have a base to then you have a base of goblin tokens to then play Krenko out on.
Right.
So a lot of the times I will make deals with people where I'm like, hey, do you mind taking maybe 5 damage so that I can put +1/+1 counters on Krenko and make some more goblin tokens?
Not realizing what's coming later, they'll say, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So I would probably make that deal thinking, well, you know what? I've got a board wipe in my hand. I can just clean the whole slate here and start over again. Yeah. That doesn't matter in this case.
No, especially not with things like Impact Tremors or Goblin Bombardment, where I also don't care about the goblins that I'm summoning.
Because they're going to come right back and fill the board again.
Yeah. Treasure Nabber is another essential but kind of pricier card. Mm-hmm. It's great because you get everyone's mana rocks.
Sure.
You're not like, I mean, with Kuldotha Rebirth, you obviously it's a little malicious,
right?
But normally I haven't even been able to pull off that combo. So normally I'm just like sitting there like with things, kind of slobbering all over them. But
but the Treasure Nabber can come in and snatch those things up and give you a place to sacrifice them to. So nice.
Yeah, Pashalik Mons is a good one because he turns your deck from a goblin deck into from a tribal deck into a aristocrat's deck.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Goblin King is good because it gives +1/+1 creature +1/+1 to goblins and gives them Mountain Walk.
I love those keyword abilities. I love those ones that aren't used anymore, you know. Yeah.
This deck is chock full of those.
Okay.
Goblin Trashmaster is another amazing card because it helps against artifact decks.
Right.
It's another sacrifice outlet for Pashalik Mons. And then Skull Clamp is another necessary but a little bit boring part. It helps you get through your
more
deck.
utility stuff gets you through the deck to what you need. Sure.
Yeah. Now we get into funny stuff. I'll save my favorite for last.
Okay.
But Helm of the Host is a hilariously good card.
Eat that card
because you just have 2 goblins or 2 Krenkos.
Right.
And it pairs well with other cards that make copies of tokens. There's a couple of those in this deck, but they weren't as funny, so I decided not to show them.
Fair enough.
Coat of Arms is a hilarious and necessary part of the deck later down the line because it can turn your pile of 10 goblins from 1/1s into 10/10s.
Right.
And I mean, what's funnier than a beefy goblin? Perforos is another good card, and it's funny because I don't normally play him when I should. I play him when I'm going to get the most goblins tapped.
Okay.
And I know it's moving a little bit out of Goblin Tribal, but
fair enough.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of other stuff that makes this tribal for sure.
Yeah. Another thing that makes it out of tribal is Urbrask the Hidden. Mm-hmm. This is funny just because it draws so much ire towards me because I'm giving my own creatures haste.
As well as taking away everybody else's haste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pyroblast is another funny card that may not be necessary, but there's a lot of blue decks out there, especially in Commander, and having a counterspell in a Goblin deck.
Always handy.
Yeah. Mana Flare is a card that I don't think has ever particularly helped me, but I play it because of that potential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was actually the thing that nearly gave me the game and that I forgot to put into my computations of what I was going to do that turn, and it turned out to screw me. But it's one of those things that it gives everybody help at the table, But because you know it's in there, you're ready for it. You cast it on your clock when you want it to, and it actually does more work that way.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about it is that you are spending 3 of your mana. So, because this deck is so quick, normally it doesn't help me because I have like maximum of 5 mana, and I'm like, oh, I need to like help myself, and I don't have any of my other mana solutions. So I'm spending 3 of my mana that I could be using with Mana Flare on Mana Flare. And then I only have 4 left with the other 2 lands.
Gotcha.
So everyone at the table gets to experience that double mana before I do.
Exactly, but by the time it gets back to you, suddenly 10 mana in this deck is way different than just having 5 mana.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then my favorite card in this deck is Illusionist Bracers. Illusionist Bracers is insane because, so there's been some debate as to whether this is how the effect plays out. I've had a lot of people question me, but Wizards of the Coast posted an official ruling on it, and I'm right, and you're wrong. Yeah, so Illusionist Bracers reads, whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for that copy. So, the problem that people run into is they're on the official ruling for a little bit. It had said if X is in the cost, then X is the previous cost that you would spend.
Okay.
So Sphinx. So if you play Sphinx's Revelation, and you could if you were doing the same ability,
right.
For Sphinx's Revelation, because the X is in the mana cost, you would just draw the same amount that you paid.
Gotcha.
However, the X in Krenko is not in the cost.
It's not in the cost. No, it actually refers to what the count is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I have just Krenko and Illusionist Bracers equipped, and I tap Krenko, I make 1 goblin. And then Illusionist Bracers checks the board. So first, Krenko checks the board to see how many goblins there are. He sees himself. He's like, okay, let's put 1 other goblin out. Then Illusionist Bracers checks the board and says, okay, there's 2 goblins out, so I will make 2 more goblins.
Gotcha.
And this gets funny when you have when you've played Krenko's Command, Hordling Outburst, all before.
Right, before those illusionary bracers, before you activate his ability. Then.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then suddenly you go from 10 goblins to 40 goblins in 1 turn.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I love this card. This is probably second to Goblin Warchief. This is probably another very required card.
Gotcha.
Just because it's so good.
Right.
Now we're gonna go to funny combos in this deck. Ogre Battle Driver is a great card because he's when it's paired with Altar of Dementia.
Sure.
So Ogre Battle Driver says, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature has +2/+0 and gains haste until the end of turn.
Nice.
Now, Altar of Dementia allows you to sacrifice a creature and have target player mill cards equal to its power.
Right.
So I play those. I go from 10 to 20 goblins, and 10 to 40 goblins, and all those 40 goblins have +2/+0, so they become 3/1s. I sacrifice them all to Altar of Dementia, and suddenly someone has no deck.
Right.
And that is funny. I don't get why people don't think it's as funny as me.
I think I might know why.
But, I mean...
First time it happens, it's funny. Second time...
Truly a mystery for the ages.
Exactly.
Altar of the Brood is another hilarious mill card in this deck. Because you're making so many permanents, so Altar of the Brood reads, whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So every time you play a creature, you're milling one. Now, you're making a ton of goblins in this deck.
Right.
So people are just constantly milling their cards. Not so good against graveyard decks, but still funny.
Yes, yes.
Because it moves from being a mono-red deck to almost being a blue-black deck.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What I like about this is because having played against this deck and seeing how it works, you're assuming that there is a straightforward fashion that you're going to win in. You see that, you think, okay, this person's making just a ton of creatures. All I have to do is be prepared with a fog, with something else, you know what I mean? I got to be prepared for that alpha strike that I know is coming. Suddenly, Altar of Dementia hits the table, and it's like, wait, I'm playing a completely different deck than what I expected.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the alternate win conditions, and that's something that we need to explore on here more.
Yeah. Another great card, I guess, when paired with Ogre Battle Driver, is Warstorm Surge, because each creature comes into the battlefield a 3/1, and you're suddenly doing 3 damage for each of those.
That's hitting the board.
Yeah. So you make 40 goblins and someone's dead.
Yes. A few somebodies if you got, yeah.
Shempa Incinerator is probably another just silly card I love. It's a 3-mana 2/1, but it has the cycle ability for 1 colorless and 1 red, and basically what it does is it checks the board for how many goblins you have, and it does that much damage to a creature. Sadly, not a player. I would love it if it was a player. There is a sorcery that does that I really want to put in this deck, but I don't have it.
Don't have it yet. All right. Well, that'll be the upgrade for the next time then.
Yeah. Burn at the Stake is another hilarious card, because you have to tap creatures as well to pay its cost. And so when you have so many tokens, you can just tap all of them.
Right.
And so Burn at the Stake deals damage to target creature or player equal to 3 times the number of creatures tapped this way.
Jeez.
So it is the ultimate player elimination.
And so this is another one where it's tap the creature, doesn't have to do with summoning sickness, it just says tap the creature.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't even need any of my haste stuff to actually make it work.
Nice.
And there's no greater feeling than tapping 20 goblins and doing just an insane amount of 60 damage to a player.
Nice.
Especially a black player, because or a person playing black, because they just like they didn't even get to make any of the deals that they want.
Right.
Mirage Mirror is a funny card. I put it in the funny section because I love paying its mana cost and copying Illusionist Bracers.
Oh, jeez.
Because it costs 5 extra mana to do that, but it's just so funny to do that ability 3 times. So instead of making going from 10 to 40, you go from 10 to 40 to 80 in a split second.
Right.
And it's just so that's the key to this deck. When I started building it, the reason was because I'd been coming to this store, and they were like, you should play a commander deck. So I was like, okay, I'll build one, and if I'm going to build one, I'm going to build something that is funny. And so at first funny was just grabbing all the goblins I could and putting them into the deck, regardless of how good they were. Right. And then funny became, how can I make goblins the top tier deck of this place?
Nice. How do you shape it into something lethal?
Yeah. Right. And you know what? I feel like I have risen through the ranks of this place.
I can say that yes, I believe that you have. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and talking about this deck. I absolutely appreciate it. Do you have any other decks to come back and share, hopefully?
I have a Phoenix deck.
Okay.
Another Mill deck.
Okay.
I made it after I put Altar of the Brood and Altar of Dementia in because Mill's funny.
Okay.
Another funny thing. And then I also have my Athreos deck.
Nice.
Which is another funny one.
Okay.
Because it's 1/1 humans.
Nice. Well, we'll look forward to having Clem come back and join us then for more funny decks. In the meantime, if you like this content and you would like to be here, come down here, take his seat, and we can talk to you about your deck and stuff if you're in the Manhattan Beach area here in California. If not, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're looking for any of these cards and you can't find them at LGS, or maybe you don't have a local game store to go to, please use the link below there, TCG Player, and that helps out the channel. In the meantime, thanks for joining us.